Hey, what's up guys? JC here, and here's how you replace a processor on your flight controller. This will actually be two separate videos. In this video, I am only going to remove a processor from a different flight controller, which I've already done, and I'm going to show you how to remove this one, and then place this one on top of this one. This is going to be the easiest way of going about this because we already have flashed onto this chip what we need. Now, I'm going to make a separate video of what if you don't want to pull a processor off of a different flight controller? You want to purchase a new processor, which I have one right here. This will be a separate video because if you use a new processor, it does not have flashed onto it what you need for it to work. And whenever you do that, this is going to require you have to download more software, download some more drivers, you have to buy a separate tool, and a lot more goes into it. So not sure when I'll be posting that video. Just keep an eye on the description below, and once I do, I'll place a link to it so you can find it there. But like I said, pulling one off of an old board is the easiest way to go about this. Maybe you have a damaged board laying around somewhere with a good processor on it. That would be the ideal case. And it doesn't matter, this video will apply to everybody because I'm really just showing you how to remove it and put a new one on. So even if you do buy a new processor, you still have to watch this video because I won't be covering this again in the next one. So first let's determine if the processor is actually bad or not, because I know a lot of guys, they think they have bad processors, but really it's just a bad voltage regulator or a diode or something like that. I'm editing this video and decided to cut this part out. If you are interested in learning how you can find out if it's a bad processor or something else, then look in the description below. I made a separate video and you can find it there. By the way, something I forgot to mention, whenever you pull a processor off of an old board, it does not have to be the same exact board. There will be different firmware on this, but once we replace it, we can easily change the firmware to whatever flight controller we are using. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be the same exact board. First, let's understand where the top of the processor is. If you look at it this way, we will see some writing on it, and this writing does not mean that this is the top. What you're looking for are these dots. The F3 boards only have one dot on the processor. The F4 chips have two dots. We're not looking at this one. We're actually looking for this one. It's kind of indented in. Not only that, but you can tell by this little arrow right here. Not all flight controllers have this arrow, but you really don't need it. You're just looking for this indented in dot. With the dot in the top left, that is the top of your processor. So this is the top, bottom, right side, and left side. All the tools I'm about to use, I'll leave links to them in the description below so you can check them out there. I'm going to place this in my helping hand. There are better tools for holding flight controllers, but I just use a helping hand. You want to make sure that it is as level as you can get it. I know it might not look level on your screen because my camera's at an angle, but it's level for me. I'm now going to take some flux paste and put a little bit on all the legs of the processor. And you don't have to get crazy with this, it doesn't take much at all. The reason we use flux is because this will help liquefy the solder even faster. So we're trying to liquefy all the solder of the processor pins before everything else on the board. The solder also turns to liquid on that stuff, because if you do liquefy the solder on everything else, then a bunch of the stuff could just come off. If you barely bump the processor or bump the flight controller, then things could shift, and it is such a pain to put everything back to where it should be. Also, this will reduce the amount of time that we are using the hot air gun on it, and that will keep other things from like melting, which is what we want. We're trying not to damage anything else. I don't feel like moving my camera just to show you my hot air gun. I mean, this is part of it, but I'll leave a link to this. I'm setting it to 400 degrees, and for the air control knob, I'm setting it to 1. I don't want that much airflow at all, because if anything else, the solder for anything else liquefies and you have your air turned up really high, it could blow that, like all these tiny little resistors and stuff like that, it could blow it off, and you have to like realign everything. It's a pain. So what's going to happen is I'm going to hold this hot air gun on it, and every now and then, every few seconds, just give it a little tap with my ceramic tweezers and see when the solder is kind of liquefied and I can pull the processor off the board. You want to make sure that the solder for all the little legs is liquefied, because if you try to pull this off and even just one of them hasn't let go yet, then it's going to pull the trace off the board. Once the trace is pulled off the board is complete trash. There is no coming back from that. There is no repair for that. And whenever I pull it off, I'm going to be as gentle as possible and try to pull it straight up, because if this thing shifts around too much, I've had times where I accidentally bumped into these little resistors and anything else, and it shifts it off of its solder pad, and then, like I said, it's a super pain trying to get everything back in place perfectly. I explained all that first because I know once I get ready to pull it off, I'm going to be like super concentrating hard, so. But let's give it a go, see what happens. I'm just going in tiny circles, and about now I'm going to just keep tapping it and wait for it to shift. And like I said, don't shift it too much. You don't want to bump into anything else. I'm also trying to keep heat off of this plastic JST connector because those things do like to melt. If you do have any in your way, you can remove them first, and then once you get done with the repair, you can just put another one back on. Okay, so it just shifted. I'm going to give it a little bit more heat, and then quickly put my hot air gun back in its holder and remove this before it dries. And I wasn't fast enough. So let's try this again. I'm going to swap hands. Okay, it's shifting on this corner, but this corner is not. And now it's ready to pull off. These F4 processors are kind of large, so it's really hard to get these to come off with one hand at least. And there we go. You can see here that I did not touch anything else. So thankfully I won't have to be spending time trying to put these little resistors and capacitors back to where they should be. Now I'm going to fast forward the video and give this time to cool off, because I want to make sure that I don't touch anything and shift anything around. Okay, fast forwarding, it's had time to cool off, so now I'm going to take some flux cleaner and remover in an aerosol can, and let's spray this off. And then take a brush, kind of brush this around, give it another spray, maybe even wipe it off a little bit. At this point I'm going to take some solder wick and cut it, get a nice clean piece. I mean, don't cut it off, but I'm just saying, have a clean piece. Take some more of this flux paste, and I'm going to put some on the tip. Take my soldering iron and kind of melt it into the wick. Now we're going to use this to remove the solder that's remaining on these pads. Once again, you want to make sure you do not bump into any of these resistors or capacitors. Okay, now we've got some nice clean pads. I'm going to take a little bit more flux paste, and I mean a little bit. We are not looking for much at all. Put some back on the pads. Now take my hot air gun, and we're just going to kind of meld it, because this is going to make it turn kind of tacky and sticky, and this is going to help us put the flux paste on. Now I'm going to take some flux paste, and when you do this, when I say use a little bit, I mean use a little bit, because if you use too much, then solder is going to get in between the legs on the processor, and it's going to short them against one another. I'm just going to put a little bit on one corner. I'm telling you, I mean a little bit. Put a little bit on another corner. Place the new processor on, or if you were reusing one, that's fine too. Make sure you have the orientation in the right spot. So we got this arrow right here, which means I need my dot to be right here. Now you want to take a good amount of time to make sure all the legs are perfectly lined up. This is another reason why we put more flux down and then heated it up, because with it sticky like that, it's going to kind of hold the processor in place. And it also helps us get the flux paste on. So now I'm going to take my hot air gun and heat up those corners, and that's going to hold down a couple legs. If you still have solder on the legs of this processor because we were reusing it, then go ahead and heat up everything else. Now just give it a little bit of a tap and see if it's being held down in place. And it is, so that means that these legs are soldered down on these two corners. At this point, I'm going to take the solder paste and seriously just apply a little bit to all the legs, and I'm going to try to keep it on the very edge, as far to the edge as I can get. So I just get a little bit out like this, and then I take my razor blade, and then I use my razor blade to apply it. Alright, so now I've got solder paste applied. If you don't know, solder paste is basically solder, but in a paste. And then once you heat it up, it turns into a solid. So now let's apply heat, and you will see it magically turn into a solid. Okay, that should be good enough. Now I'm going to let it cool off again and fast forward once it's cooled. Okay, now that it's cooled off, you can probably visually see that I have some solder in between two pins in multiple places. So this is going to cause a short unless we fix it. And that's why I say use as little solder paste as possible. This was unavoidable because we were reusing an old processor. It already had solder on it, but it's really not that big of a deal. So going back to the solder wick, you can easily wick this up. And let's see how much we can get off. And that seems to have fixed it. So at this point I'm going to take my multimeter, and this is very time consuming but definitely worth it. I'm going to check all the pins that are side by side to make sure that I have no shorts, because sometimes you can't see the legs are soldered together. Sometimes it's on the back side of the legs. So this is time consuming, but it's something you really want to do. Okay, I checked all my pins for shorts and I was fine. The last thing I did was spray some more flux cleaner on it. You know, brush it around a little bit, spray it again, wipe it off. And here is our almost new board. So now let's plug it into the computer and see if we can flash the correct version of firmware to it, since this did come off of a different flight controller, and see what we got. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in my USB cable and hope I don't get any smoke. Okay, no smoke, we're good. I'm getting all my LED lights. I should have pressed the button to put it into the bootloader mode, but instead, so it does connect, and it seems like we're good. But like I said, this came off of a different flight controller, so we need to put the correct version of firmware on it. I will enter the bootloader mode this way because this board does have a virtual COM port. You guys that use the CP2102 boards, you can't do that. And this is a Omnibus F4. Okay, it's finished flashing, and let's connect. And we are good. Golden. Now, this does not mean that everything is working perfectly. Like I said, it is very important that you check with the multimeter all of the legs of the processor, because you could have some that are shorted against one another. Let's see. So here's that processor pinout. Let's say, for example, that we have A12 and A11 shorted against one another. And let's just say, for example, on your specific flight controller, those pins are being used for, we'll just say, motors 1 and 3. If they are shorted against one another and it tries to send signal to motors 1 and 3, your motors are going to act crazy. And it might not be your motors, it could be something else. So that's just me reiterating. Definitely check all the pins, all the legs with a multimeter, make sure nothing is shorted against one another. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped you out. I'll have another video coming up soon of using a brand new processor. So just keep your eyes out for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.